Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg.
And I'm Mark Tucker, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Welcome back, everyone. Always great to have you here and good to talk with you again, Mark.
Yeah, it's good to see you too, Alan. It's another week. I'm sure
Another
we've
week.
lots going on, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely been one of those weeks for me.
So
pretty good, but one of those weeks.
But one of those weeks. Did it start out okay?
Definitely started out okay. Kind of been sliding downhill slowly, but no. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on.
So the launch was okay, but the rest of the conversation lagged, or we're putting it into an analogy with a voice app conversation. It started out okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy, talking about, and it's interesting to think about how invocation and launches can be different from the rest, and harder in some ways.
Yeah.
And sometimes all you really have is the launch, and you're not really, there isn't the rest, or sometimes there is. I don't know. How much do you see one-shot invocations these days?
Well, it's interesting. So just kind of like a background, normally when you start up a voice app, then it is a launch situation and you start into a conversation, and because you started the conversation, then it's up to you to end the conversation. So with a exit or a stop or something. And then the other variety, like you said, is a one shot where you just say, hey, I want this. Maybe it's a piece of information, or you want, turn on the light, or
what's the weather,
or what's the weather. Yeah. So like invoke a command or get some information, and you just want it to be done quickly. And those are handled kind of differently. And also, I guess recently, I don't see a lot, or at least I've had experiences where we haven't done one shots, but we have had launching into a specific intent, or invoking an intent, or deep intent invoking, or however you want to say it. So I've seen that more, where it's not just get the answer and exit. You might have to do at least a couple of turns of a conversation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because on the Google, I know on the Alexa side, you have a very specific launch intent.
Yes.
And on the Google side, well, they're sort of the same thing. There is a very robust notion of the fact that you could also just invoke a global intent from outside,
Yeah.
And just start out right there. And again, that's mostly meant for, it's really good for those one-shot things where you're providing a bunch of information up front and you just want the answer. But I could definitely see how that could turn into a conversation.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not as much of a conversation as it needs to do other things. And I think we'll talk about this just in a little bit later, but I've done some stuff where you have used the Alexa pin flow. So as a user on Alexa, you can set up a voice profile that matches you, and then for your voice profile, you can have a corresponding pin. And even though you say the pin out loud, if somebody else that had a different voice profile said that same pin, it wouldn't match their voice profile. So then in essence,
a little bit of extra security there.
Yeah, a little bit of extra security. So I've been working with that. And that's in essence a turn, because what happens behind the scenes in that case is that you start in with maybe your typical launch, but then you have to call what's called a skill connection, and you go ahead and send a specific directive back, which then actually redirects the conversation to a built-in pin conversation flow that Amazon handles. So you won't, as a developer, you would never get access to what that pin was. You would just get a response back saying the pin was successful, or there was a problem, or voice profile is not set up, and you can then continue on with the conversation at that point. So like if you have an invocation and you want to make sure that the pin happens before anything else happens, then all of a sudden that one shot turns into at least a pin response, then a one shot, or you may choose to like if you've got a list of things, maybe it's a list of items that you want to go through.
Right. So let's get to that in a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a question about the pin flow. This is
Okay.
similar in some ways to, I guess, how like an account linking flow would
Mhm.
work.
Yep.
That you send back the directive saying, I need to know the account, and Alexa goes and takes care of it, by itself, and then comes back to you and says, here's the account.
Well, I wish account linking worked that way.
Oh.
The way account linking, the most that you can do on account linking, if you start via the voice app, is say, I'm going to send a card back to the Alexa app and give you a voice message that says, please set up account linking first and then close the skill.
Interesting. And I know
Yes.
we've discussed this, and I've probably forgotten this because, let me rephrase, that's how account linking works on Google, is it goes into this kind of side flow where
Yeah.
you, the developer, don't really have a lot of
Yeah.
control, and it comes back and tells you who the account is or that the account linking failed.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's a similar parallel to the pin. Not identical, but similar.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I have, I've experienced on a project lately is that you have to have account linking before you can do anything. And so it goes in, like the launch intent would first check to see if you've got account linking. And if you don't have account linking, then you're going to send a card and say, hey, you need to do account linking, exit the skill, you're done. If it passes the check and you have been account linked, then the next thing it's going to do is kick off a pin flow and then wait to hear back from the response from that pin flow to see if you've successfully, given your pin, at which point then you continue on with the rest of the startup. So it's like, you can do this, or, the welcome message, whatever else you wanted to do after that.
No, that's interesting. You actually have the welcome message after the pin?
Well, the way in this case, I actually have the welcome message as welcome to blah, blah, blah to get started.
Please enter your pin.
Please enter your pin. But then there is still kind of this like, welcome, here we go. Or in some cases, it almost seems like it's a welcome part.
Welcome back.
Yeah, kind of. It's like, okay, we're ready to get started.
Now that we got that out of the way, let's.
Yeah. So it's been kind of interesting because that, in conjunction with this idea of invoking into an intent. So now, if you were to invoke into an intent, like you have something that was like list items was the intent that you would normally say. So you could like launch and go through the pin flow, and then it would do the, okay, we're ready to get started. What do you want to do? And I'd say list items, right? But if you wanted to deep invoke into that, or then you would have to say some sort of a longer invocation phrase. So you would say something like, wake word, open, whatever the skill name is, and list items.
Mm-hmm. Ask Mark's app to list items.
Exactly. So there's a number of there's probably about a half a dozen different words or phrase combinations where
it's something like that. On Google, there are 3 invocation phrases.
What are those again?
It is ask, name, speak to, name, or talk to, name. And you can actually, there's some slight variance on that as well. So you can say things like, can I speak to Mark's app? So there's some variant in there. It doesn't have to be exactly those, but those are the 3 that are available.
So and so you, with those additional invocation phrases that has some combination of the wake word, the skill name, and the intent that you want to invoke, then you can the idea is that you would go right into this flow. So like if I didn't have account linking or pin, then the experience would be, I would say, ask skill to list items. And it would just, the first thing you'd hear, like, there are 3 items. The first item is this, blah, 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 blah. Would you like to hear the next item, or want to continue, or, whatever. And so
we'll talk about that interface in a minute, I think.
Yeah. So, and that also hints at the fact that you may have a situation where you're thinking that it's a one shot, but the one shot really is still multiple turns in the conversation, right? So,
But if you don't have the pin, what does that flow sound like?
yeah. So if you don't have the pin, then you're going, or if you give the wrong pin, one of those, then it's going to give you some sort of a message like, oh, before we continue on, you need to set up your voice profile and create a pin. Please come back when you're done. Goodbye. So you just same kind of, you terminate it quickly. Same thing as if you didn't have account linking set up, then it would say, hey, account
okay.
link.
So if I said, and I have account linking and a pin set up, and I said, ask Mark's app for the list of items.
Yeah.
What would it do?
So you'd probably, well, you get the welcome to blah, 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 blah. Before we get started, we'd like to request a pin, or please verify with a pin. So then you'd give a pin and like, all right, we're ready to go. The first item is, so we're listing items. For the first item is.
Right. So now this means at your list item intent handler, you need to check to see if a pin has been entered or not. Right?
Well, I had to hit this situation because it's a little bit. Go ahead. What's your question, and I'll explain.
Because as I'm thinking about it, I can get to the list item intent in two ways. I can either get there from the normal launch intent and then say list items.
Yep.
Or I can get to it from a direct invocation, saying open whatever and list items. And it's the same handler. I want to handle it ultimately. What comes back is the same, but I've got two ways in there.
Yeah. So one way to
check for the pin?
Yeah. So one way to handle that is to, in the launch, you've got your check for your pin flow, and then also in your handler that handles your list items, then you also check for the pin there. But then you've got the side effect of, well, there might be 20 intents. So then do in every 20, in every one of the 20 intents, do you check for the pin? So this is how I implement it in this case. So this is a case where I'm using Jovo. Jovo has this idea of a router. And so a request comes in and it takes a look to see at what the intent was. Well, one was it a launch, because that's a different request type than an intent is. So it checks to see what it is, and then there's also this handy thing that you can do with Jovo, is where you can have this JavaScript object where the key is a map to some string as the value that says, if I come in as Amazon.help intent, it's going to map to help intent. And the way that helps is, but if I'm also doing a Google Assistant and I've named its help intent, then in essence in code, I can have one handler that the exact same handler that handles both. But we're not going to talk about that because we're talking about pin flow, and that would be that's not something we're doing with Google Assistant right now. So what I ended up doing is, as it comes in, and before it hits this router, there's this concept of hooks and this like middleware. So if you've done something with like Node.js and you've done middlewares and you can plug things in at different points of the life cycle, then there is a part before the request happens where I do a hook and I check and I say, is this a new session? Because basically what I'm saying is, whenever there's a new session, I want to start with a pin, regardless if it's a launch or a specific intent handler. So when I check at that point, what I do is, if it is a new session, then I look at what the intent was going to be. So let's say that was the list items intent. So I say, oh, it's supposed to be list items intent. And so I'm going to store that away in a variable. And then I redirect, or actually I replace the path and say, go to launch. So in essence, my launch is the only place where it has the check for account linking and for the pin. So I just redirect to launch, because what happens is when the pin flow happens, you have to send a directive back and say, start the pin flow. So now I've handed off to Amazon. And then when that comes back, there's another handler that gets executed saying that it's completed. So in that check, then I say, oh, does this variable exist? This kind of like redirect or original intent name, does that exist? And if it does, then in that code, I redirect to that intent. And so at that point, then the pin's already been handled and I can redirect. And if not, then it gives you my standard kind of vanilla, well, you can do lots of different things. You can, do this or whatever it is that you're going to.
So so this is a good one. Let me tell you how multivocal is equipped to handle this, because it doesn't handle pins yet, because it doesn't deal with the Alexa side. It has something called a prerequisite.
Interesting.
So Jovo is a great platform that we like working with. We like the Jovo guys. Multivocal is a library that I've been developing to help with kind of as a replacement for the Alexa Skills Kit and the Actions on Google library. So it's meant purely as a backend thing. So you can set against any intent, or what it refers to as an action handler. You can say, in order for this to execute, this condition must be met. And that's something you set in the configuration. And you can then say, if that configuration is not met, here's what gets triggered instead.
Oh, very, very nice. That is nice, because then you can specify saying, if you're going to, these 20 intents, I want to make sure that the pin handler,
So
pin invocation has been successful. And if not, I want you to call the thing that's going to ask you the pin.
Exactly. And this is rigged up, this is set up for Actions on Google for account linking. So you can say, these intents all require an account. And if an account is not there, here's how you go get an account. Oh,
so you can have like the typical website where this is a public part of the website and this is the, authenticated only side. Yeah.
Right. The recommendation on the Google side is that you at least have something, you have the ability so that people can invoke the action and ask a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Before you force them to link their account. Because otherwise they're going to go, well, why do I want to link my account again?
Yeah.
So it has that feature, but it also, prerequisites are a generic thing. So I've set up default prerequisites for account linking. But in theory, for example, if I needed you to tell me what your color was in order to do anything, I could say, well, okay, all of these intents require a color. And if I don't have a color, go over to the intent that asks you for a color.
Yeah,
and then
that makes sense.
And then the other kicker is that when it finishes that flow, once it does have that, it just goes right back into the intent that you were trying to invoke in the first place.
Oh, that's very nice.
So
I like that.
Multivocal handles a lot of it for you. And all you need to do is specify it as part of the configuration, what the prerequisites are. And you can specify more than one prerequisite. I need to know your color and your favorite food. And, it keeps trying getting that info. Now, it can, if you don't give it a color ever, it just keeps saying, well, I want your color, I'm not going to let you in unless you tell this to me. So there's some error handling you need to put in there. But I feel like it's doing the exact same thing that you just specified, except it's now set up in the configuration by default.
It's configurable and you can have conditions and it's flexible. No, exactly. Something that's interesting that I did hit. So remember that there are different ways that you can store information either about the session or about the user. And so the way that session storage is handled in Alexa is that in essence, there's this dictionary where you put things and it comes back as part of the response. And then in the next request, magically, it's part of the request.
Yep. And so Google has the same notion. It's the same thing for sessions.
So I was thinking, when the pin thing handle, the request happened and I was capturing what the original intent was, then I put it in session storage. And then when it came back after the pin flow was completed, I pulled it out of session, and then it just always went to the default. It never went to the invoke. And I was like, what's going on? And so I ended up having to do logging. Turns out, because I'm doing a skills connection, directing off to the pin flow, for some reason in that scenario, I think it's something on the Amazon side, it doesn't persist. It doesn't track that session into that flow and back out. So the trick is I just had to escalate it up to, a more persistent. So up at the user level, the user storage, so that it's there. And it really only need it for a session. But what it does is that when it comes back from the pin flow, it checks to see if it's there. If it is, then it deletes it and then does the redirect to where it was supposed to go originally. And it's good to go.
That's annoying. I mean, that's
yeah.
weird
It wasn't
and annoying.
Yeah, it seems like I've stumbled across that before, but then it's one of those things that you forget about if you don't.
Is it the same session identifier when you come back?
So, I was looking in the logs, and I can see my requests coming in, my original launch or my original intent request in this case. And I'm like, okay, that's the session ID. And then I see the directive coming back as part of the response. And then the next, it's completed. So I get that. And it's the same session ID, but the session variables aren't there.
Weird.
Yeah.
Huh. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen anything similar on the Google side. I probably have. There are probably similar bugs there, but that really does seem like a bug, though.
It does seem like that's a bug. But two other things that I saw that were kind of interesting is I've got this list items. I also have something that's track items as far as my intents go. So when I'm doing this longer invocation where I say and list items or and track items, then sometimes the 1P invocation gets in the way. So depending on where I pause, it might think that I'm trying to add something to a custom list on the Alexa side of things, because you can create custom lists and say like add blah 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 to like your Costco list or whatever, right? So sometimes I get a 1P response saying that it can't find that list, which I'm just like, I don't know, and I haven't really tracked exactly when that happens. If I do a pause or if I've said something slightly different in the whole phrase pattern for the invocation. The other one is that sometimes it's trying to give me status of my shipments, my tracked shipments that Amazon likes to keep track of. So when I say track items, sometimes it thinks, I do the whole phrase and the end of it is track items. And it's like, you have 0 items to track. And I was like, what? And it gives me I've got my screen. And so it gives me the Amazon same thing logo, that I get on the Amazon. And I'm just like, okay, this failed the invocation.
Really, I was going to say, it's really interesting to see, and this is something I've seen some conversation about recently, when it chooses to invoke something as a first party skill or action versus when it lets it through as a third party one. And sometimes it's really a bit overzealous in trying to make it a first party experience.
Yeah, sometimes it is.
I've seen people ask questions like, how do we make it so we see that this invokes a first party experience playing a podcast. How do we make it invoke our skill instead? And our skill is for this podcast, so it's not like we can change the name.
Yeah.
How do we do that? And the answers have been, well, you can try this.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll work.
Yeah, it's not always clear on what, and then, and it's going to get a little bit more confusing too, as we get things like name free invocation where you don't have to say the skill name and then it's going. So yeah, I haven't played with that a lot. So I'm not sure what would happen with that, with, trying to get to a specific intent inside of.
But one of the things that is a surefire workaround for all of this is setting up routines.
Yeah.
Set up a routine. Whatever shortcut you set up for that routine will invoke things the way you want it to invoke, will invoke the right thing. The catch, though, is you can't have parameters in routines.
Yeah.
Well, there are a bunch of catches. One of the catches is you can't have parameters in routines. Another one is you have to teach people how to use routines.
Yeah, that's true. And that's just like another thing that's going to make it more challenging for people to do what they need to do. But I don't know, that's been kind of my fun in invoking.
Invocations are tough,
and
and dealing with invocations as a developer, there's a lot that we need to pay attention to. But I think we summarized it pretty well.
Yeah, got a couple different options there. Sounds like I'm impressed with the solution with multivocal, how they handled it.
So am I.
Great developer behind that framework there.
You know, it's just a fantastic team that's working on it, right?
Is it?
Yes.
Some of the best people that you've worked with?
Of course, absolutely. They're, you know, some of them are characters, and I don't trust some of their code sometimes, but you know. So, you know, if you've got tricks that you like to use when you're invoking, or how you would handle some of these situations, we would love to hear about them. Because, you know, there's a lot that's out there and a lot of solutions that we need to work on. So feel free to leave a comment below. You can find Mark and I are on Twitter or on LinkedIn. You have any other thoughts, Mark?
Nope. Just enjoy your coding, and good luck with your invocations and your voice apps.
So we hope we'll see you all another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Alan.
You as well, Mark. Have a great week.
All right. Bye-bye.